This level belongs to the folks who looked at the laws of biology and decided those were more like polite suggestions they could safely ignore through enough brooding and cardio. They live in places like Gotham or Hub City, which are essentially the municipal equivalent of a dumpster fire that somehow pays taxes. One special thing that these guys don't have: laser eyes or the ability to fly. They just have a lot of trauma and enough specialized training to make a Navy SEAL look like a mall security guard. In my words, they bridge the gap between guy who can't find his keys and guy who can punch a god in the throat, using nothing but grit, gadgets, and maybe a complete lack of a social life. Batman. Batman, or Bruce Wayne if you're his tax accountant, is the poster child of this brand of obsessive overachievement. That's because he's mastered 127 martial arts, which is about 126 more than anyone else needs to win a bar fight. But he's thorough like that. Not only that, he's also been known to bench press over 1,000 pounds as a casual warm-up, which is basically the weight of a small grand piano or 5 Lizzos. He's so strong for a human that he could shatter brick walls with his bare knuckles and snap steel chains like they're made of wet spaghetti. What's even wilder is his habit of dodging bullets at point-blank range. Not because he's faster than a projectile, but because he's already calculated where the shooter's aiming before they even finish pulling the trigger. If there's an easy way to describe him, I'd say he's essentially a walking supercomputer that's also really good at kicking people in the ribs. Green Arrow, also known as Oliver Queen, is the man who brought a bow to a nuclear war and somehow didn't die immediately. That's because Oliver can fire 30 arrows in 60 seconds with the kind of accuracy that makes professional snipers look like Fortnite gamers. My favorite thing about him is that he famously shot a single drop of water falling from a faucet. That's pure skill. On top of that, he does all this while backflipping off rooftops and falling from planes, because apparently standing still is for losers. Nightwing. Nightwing, or Dick Grayson, takes the athleticism even further by being the best acrobat in the universe full of people who fly for a living. He's survived falls at terminal velocity using grappling hooks with the timing of a Swiss watch. If that's not crazy enough, he can also dismantle giant, enhanced villains like Blockbuster by hitting nerve clusters that most people don't even know they have. The Question. Rounding out this group of high-functioning outsiders is The Question, Vic Sage, who doesn't have $1 billion or trick arrows. He just has a face that looks like a blank thumb and a brain that can see conspiracies in a bowl of alphabet soup. That's because he relies on zen-like mental focus and a deductive mind that's so sharp it probably hurts to use. I will say, this guy is the exact reason why knowing exactly who's poisoning the water supply is just as important as knowing how to throw a roundhouse kick. Level 2, Superhuman. If the previous guys were the limit of what human can do with a lot of kale and therapy, this tier is where things get weirdly scientific and maybe slightly illegal. These are the Enchanted, the characters who took a shortcut through a laboratory, a mystical temple, or a cybernetic repair shop to become something more than human. We're talking about people who can run faster than a sports car, heal from a gunshot wound during their lunch break, and punch through a bank vault like it's a wet cardboard box. What makes them different is that, while they still hang out in cities and deal with terrestrial problems, if a normal person tried to do what they do, their bones would basically turn into a fine powder. I'm calling them the professional hitters of the DC world, the ones you call when you need someone to survive a building falling on them. Deathstroke. Deathstroke, the Terminator, or Slade Wilson, is the gold standard of being a scary science experiment gone right. After a military serum unlocked a massive chunk of his brain capacity, he became a tactical genius with reflexes that made a cat look sluggish. He's probably one of my favorite villains because he once took on almost the entire Justice League by himself in the Identity Crisis story. Crazy thing is, he didn't do it with a magic wand. He just moved so fast he could predict the Flash's path and overpower a Green Lantern's concentration through sheer, terrifying competence. To put it simply, he's the kind of guy who brings a sword to a gunfight and makes the guys with guns feel like they're the ones who are under-equipped. Black Canary, also known as Dina Lance, she brings a different kind of noise to the table. Literally. She's one of the best hand-to-hand fighters on the planet, but her canary cry is the real game changer. The ultrasonic scream that can shatter reinforced steel and level entire apartment buildings. Which is great if you have streamer neighbors who keep screaming at the top of their lungs even in the middle of the night. What's even crazier is that it's powerful enough to make Superman's ears bleed, which I would say is an impressive feat for someone who doesn't even have alien DNA. Midnighter. Then you have Midnighter, who is basically what happens if you give Batman a combat computer in his brain and take away his no-killing rule. This guy is insane, because with his cybernetic augmentation, he can run millions of battle simulations in his head before the fight starts, meaning he's already won the fight before you've even finished saying hello. Not only that, he's also been known to kick artillery shells out of the air, which is a very dramatic way to show off his processing speed. Bane. Finally, there's Bane, who is a physical powerhouse even without his drugs. But when he pumps himself full of the Venom steroid, he becomes a walking mountain. He's famous for lifting Batman over his head and breaking his spine, proving that being the man who broke the bat is a pretty solid way of building a resume. With these extra juices, you can make a safe bet that superhumans beat peak humans in every way, most of the time. Level 3, Global. Now we're moving away from the city-level threats into the territory of people who can accidentally ruin a country if they have a bad day. These are global tier characters, often called the heavy metas, and they are the backbone of Earth's defense. That's because they can move cities, manipulate entire oceans, or hack into every computer on the planet at once. They are significantly more powerful than street-level heroes, but they still have human-adjacent problems, like needing to breathe air or not being able to juggle moons. I'm calling them the planetary security guards who keep things from falling apart when the literal gods are busy arguing in space. Aquaman. Arthur Curry is the most disrespected man in the room until people realize he can bench press a submarine. Because his body is built to survive the crushing pressure of the ocean floor, he is incredibly tough and strong on dry land. That's also why he's been seen lifting entire city blocks, tossing nuclear subs around like they're toys at bath time. But that's not the end of it, because beyond just being a physical beast, his telepathic control over marine life means he basically owns 70% of the planet, making him the ultimate landlord. If you like sushi and fish and chips, you better not piss him off. Cyborg. On the tech side of things, you have Cyborg, or Victor Stone, who is bonded with a mother box, which I would just describe as an alien smartphone who can also turn your arm into a cannon. With this technology, he can interface with every satellite and military network on Earth simultaneously, making him the world's most dangerous IT professional. Comment down below if you're an IT guy and Cyborg's your idol. Starfire. Starfire, or Princess Coriander, brings some serious alien heat to the mix. Her body is a living solar panel that turns ultraviolet light into flight and starbolts that can melt alien armor and level city grids. She's also incredibly hot. I can't stop looking at her. Oops, went a bit off script there. My bad. Well, to put it simply, she's like a friendly battery that can also blow up a mountain range if she gets annoyed enough. Superboy. Then there's Superboy, Connor Kent, who is a clone of Superman but with a twist. Instead of having just standard Kryptonian powers, he has tactile telekinesis, which lets him manipulate anything he touches. Because of that, he can hold a massive bridge together just by putting his hands on it, or take a tank apart bolt by bolt with a single thought. If I'm being honest, he's not quite at the moving a planet level of his older counterpart, but he's still more than enough to handle a global invasion without breaking a sweat. Level 4, Planetary. This is the tier where the physics textbook just gives up and goes home to cry. We're talking about the heavy hitters, the beings who view a planet not as a home, but as a fragile marble they have to be careful not to break. These characters can fly across the galaxy at speeds that make light look slow, survive being inside a sun, and move tectonic plates like they're rearranging the living room furniture. What's awesome to me is that their flights aren't just loud. They're atmospheric events that cause global earthquakes and change the weather. Make sure you have some insurance, because if you see these guys fighting near your area, your house is probably going to be collateral damage. Superman. Superman, Kal-El, is the guy who started it all and remains the measuring stick for everyone else. I'm calling him a living solar battery who once bench pressed the weight of the entire Earth for 5 days straight without even getting a tan. To make things even crazier, he could drag planets through space and absorb the energy of a supernova like it's a light snack. But probably what I like the most about him is that his brain works so fast, he can process information at attoseconds, which is a unit of time so small it basically doesn't exist for anyone else. Wonder Woman. Then there's Wonder Woman, Diana of Thessamakira, who's the magical equivalent of Superman's science. She's a demigod who has helped pull the sun and block shards of gods flying from the edge of the universe with her bracelets. What's so amazing is that she spent centuries training to fight, making her the most dangerous person in the room, regardless of how many planets you can lift. Within the Justice League, Martian Manhunter, John Johns, is the guy even Superman is a little bit afraid of. Not only is he as strong and as fast as a Kryptonian, but he's also a telepath who can link his mind to every person on Earth at once. He can turn invisible, walk through walls, or turn his body into a giant monster, making him the ultimate Swiss Army knife of destruction. Green Lantern. And don't forget the Green Lanterns, specifically Hal Jordan, who has a ring that can create anything he can imagine as long as he's brave enough. Hal has used his willpower to hold a broken planet together and reignite dying suns, proving that if you're stubborn enough, you can basically ignore the end of the universe. What's even more mind-boggling is that he's traversed the galaxy in minutes and contained the blast of an exploding star, all while wearing green spandex. Level 5, Universal. Welcome to the deep end, where we stop measuring power in how many tons you can lift and start measuring it in how many galaxies did you delete today. The universal tier is for beings whose existence is woven into the very fabric of reality. These are the cosmic gods who treat the laws of physics like minor suggestions and can warp the space-time continuum for fun. What's bad news is that if two of these entities get into a disagreement, they don't just break windows, they collapse dimensions and extinguish entire civilizations. They don't just live in the universe, they are the universe's bosses, and they rarely give out raises. Darkseid. Darkseid, at least in his true form, is the ultimate boss-level threat. While the version that shows up to punch Superman is just a shadow of his real self, his true form lives in a higher dimension called the God Sphere. His mere presence is so heavy that when he starts dying and falling into the regular multiverse, he begins dragging all of reality down into a hole with him. Darkseid is probably up there in my Mount Rushmore of DC villains because he's the living embodiment of tyranny and wants to find the anti-life equation to turn every living thing into a mindless extension of his own will. The Spectre. On the other side of the coin, you have the Spectre, who is the literal wrath of God bound to a human soul. He can grow larger than the Milky Way to wrestle with cosmic monsters or turn a powerful wizard into a pile of glass with a snap of his fingers. He's definitely very strong and one of my favorite characters ever, but his only real limit is that he has to follow the rules of the big boss upstairs, which kind of gives me a confidence boost because I can relate to him in some ways. Trigon. Trigon the Terrible is another heavy hitter who conquered his own dimension before he was even out of diapers. This guy is a multidimensional demon who drains the life force of planets to keep himself busy and has enough dark magic to make the Justice League look like they're performing card tricks at a birthday party. But the worst thing about these universal beings that aren't just the fact that they're strong, they are also foundational forces of entropy, judgment, and conquest. They see time as a flat circle and the universe as their personal playground. When they move, the stars tremble. When they speak, reality tends to buckle under the weight of their voice. But lucky for us, there are guys above him who stomp them in just a second. Level 6, Multiversal. This is where the scale goes from extremely big to everything everywhere all at once. The multiversal tier is reserved for beings who treat an entire universe like a single grape in a giant cluster. These are the crisis-level threats, the ones who show up and force the entire DC history to reboot because they accidentally sat on the timeline. The worst part is that they don't just threaten one world, they threaten infinite worlds across infinite timelines. That's because their power sets involve antimatter, hypertime, and the ability to rewrite the rules of creation itself. I look at them as game changers who view standard gods and heroes as little more than background noise in their grand destructive plans. The Anti-Monitor. We should give this guy a medal because the Anti-Monitor practically invented the crisis. Coming from the antimatter universe, he spent his time erasing thousands of universes from existence with a giant wave of antimatter, just because he wanted to be the only thing left, which, as a lonely guy, I find weird. He absorbed the energy of all those dead worlds to get even stronger and fought the Spectre at the beginning of time to decide how the next reality would look. Perpetua. Then you have Perpetua, a super celestial who actually built the original multiverse, but then got tucked away behind a source wall for being too much of a troublemaker. When she got out, she started throwing planets like they were dodgeballs and rewriting the laws of existence to make evil the default setting. To be honest, I'm not a big fan of her because she essentially is the grumpy grandmother of the multiverse who decided the whole thing needed a renovation. Mr. Mistlick. For a bit of a variety, there's Mr. Mistlick, an imp from the 5th dimension who is basically a chaotic god with a funny hat. Because he lives in a higher dimension, he views our 3D reality as a flat comic book that he could draw on or erase whenever he feels like it. What I like about him is that he's not evil in the traditional sense, he's just a cosmic prankster who once held the entire multiverse in his hand as a joke. He can rewrite history, turn the moon into green cheese, or recreate the universe because he was bored on a Tuesday. But the worst part is that his power is absolute, limited only by his own bizarre sense of humor and his willingness to play by his own rules. I would say, though, as long as he's unaware of Italian brain rots, I think we're pretty safe. So yeah, when these multiversal guys are around, the question isn't, will the hero win, but will there be a universe left when they're done? Level 7, Extradimensional. This is the part that I've been waiting for because we have now officially left the building. The extra-dimensional tier isn't about physical beings anymore. It's about sentient ideas and fundamental consistence. These entities exist out of time, space, and the multiverse, residing in abstract places like the Dreaming or the Silver City. They are the living embodiments of things like death, dream, and will. What makes them so special is that you can't beat them in a fight because you can't punch the concept of ending or imagining. That's why to destroy one, they would be to erase that concept from all of existence, which would cause a paradox that would likely just reset everything anyway. Lucifer Morningstar. Lucifer Morningstar is the top dog here, possessing the infinite will of his creator to shape anything he wants. Yes, you heard that right. He's the second most powerful thing ever made, and he's so far above everyone else that he once walked into the overvoid, the blank nothingness outside of everything, and survived just to see what was there. To prove his strength, he can manipulate matter and energy on a level that makes other cosmic gods look like they're playing with Play-Doh. Michael Demiurgos. Meanwhile, Michael Demiurgos is on the other half of the coin, carrying the raw power of creation itself. While Lucifer has the will to shape things, Michael has the stuff things are made of. That's because he literally birthed the DC multiverse by releasing the energy inside him so his brother could mold it into planets and stars. If Michael were to die, the energy released would be so massive, it would wipe out every tier we've talked about so far, leaving behind an absolute void. I honestly really love this story between these two, so I recommend you check out the Lucifer series if you haven't. The Endless. Then you have the Endless, a family of 7 siblings who are older than the gods themselves. My personal favorite is Death of the Endless, which is the personification of the end, and she promised that when the very last universe dies, she'll be the one to lock up and turn out the lights. But it gets even more interesting from here because her brother Dream, or Morpheus, controls everything that isn't real. The stories, the myths, and the collective subconscious of every living thing. In the end, these extra-dimensional beings don't have fights in the way we think of them. They have conceptual shifts that change the nature of what it means to exist. They are the ultimate observers and architects standing at the edge of reality and making sure the lights stay on or go out when the time's right. Level 8, Supreme Beings. Finally, we reach the ceiling, the Do Not Disturb sign at the top of the universe. This level is for the beings who aren't even really characters. They are the meta foundations of the entire franchise. They represent the writer, the editor, and the blank page. Why? Because they are omnipotent, omniscient, and omnipresent, meaning they know everything, can do anything, and are everywhere at once. Every single multiversal crisis, every planetary hero, and every conceptual god exists only because these entities allow them to stay in the script. They are the absolute authority, the ones who decide when the story begins and when it's time to cancel the series. The Presence. The Presence is the traditional Big G god of the DC universe. He's the one who made Michael and Lucifer, established the rules of magic, and keeps the whole show running from behind the scenes. I love that he usually shows up as something humble, like a guy in a suit or a talking dog, because when you're the ultimate creator, you don't really need to show off. The Source. Then there's the Source, which is the infinite energy beyond the source wall. It's the origin of all power, whether it's magic, the Speed Force, or a Green Lantern ring. Everything eventually traces back to this unknowable wellspring. It's the cosmic unconsciousness that keeps the universe in balance, and it's completely untouchable by anything that lives inside the multiverse. The Overvoid. At the very top of the pile is the Overvoid, also known as the Monitor Mind. This is literally the blank white paper that the comic books are drawn on. It's a sentient infinite nothingness that noticed the entire DC multiverse appearing as a tiny itchy speck on its surface. The Overvoid is the ultimate canvas, and it's definitely larger and more powerful than any story ever told within it. It doesn't need to fight or act because everything else is just ink on its skin. It proves that no matter how many multiverses Superman saves, he's still just a drawing on a page held by a much larger reality. In the absolute end of the line, the place where the fiction meets the actual world we live in. Well, that's it for this one. If you liked the video, hit that like button, subscribe for more, and ring the bell so you never miss a drop. Craving more stories from comics, movies, and beyond? Check out this video right here. Cheers, and see you in the next one.